Welcome everybody to JEDI Disruption, these lively and crisp conversation with policy, media and technology leaders on topics around Europe and innovation. So we're delighted today to have Gabriel Grésillon with us, and we will have a 20-minute conversation on especially the next generation Europe, the mega 750 billion euro recovery plan that was announced 48 hours ago. And Gabriel and I date back a long time because we knew each other from China. I mean, that's where we, at least myself, become a real European. So Gabriel, very nice to have you here today.
Thanks a lot.
So let's go directly into the hard topic. Why is this mega plan a historical step or not for Europe?
I mean, it's a big word, so usually I try to refrain from using it. And to be honest, I didn't write it in my articles because I think it's always easier to say if something was historic when, 20 years later. But in this case, something at least very new and very interesting is being done. If it finally happens, because it will depend on the negotiation between member states. But the idea is very new. It's that the core idea is that the Europeans are going to borrow money together. And you could argue that this has already been done. I mean, if you look at the ESM or the way the European Investment Bank works, it's already about borrowing money together. But the big difference is that in this case, I mean, if the ESM borrows money, then the money is lent to a member state, a government, and this government will have to pay back. So it's just a way for the government to have access to funding with cheap rates, low rates. In the current project, it's very different. The European Commission is going to borrow money, and then this money will be used to help regions, countries, businesses get out of this big COVID mess. So meaning this finally means that the governments which will get the money are not the ones who will have to pay back. So there is a transfer, and this is very new, and this maybe is a historical moment indeed.
Okay, so you compare that to the European Stability Mechanism or to the Juncker plan we saw before. So tell us a little bit about some key elements, because at the same time than the plan, there were already some indication about the priorities that the European Union will have for this year and for the years to come, the famous 7-year plan, the MFF. Can you tell us a bit where this money is going to be deployed?
I mean, it's still a bit early to answer this question, but we understand that there are some priorities. I will focus right now on the recovery plan, but of course there is also the 7-year MFF, so-called multi-financial framework. But I mean, what is interesting is the fact that the political priorities that have been defined before this are going to be in the core of this program. So, for example, Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the Commission, has been very clear that the Green Deal has to be at the core of this project. They also want to spend a lot of money in innovation, but I mean, we need to know exactly how it will work, because the devil is in the details. But if you look at the way the Green Deal is going to be implemented, for example, we still don't know. One of the things we understand is that there's going to be a so-called do not harm principle. So meaning that any project funded by the European Union should not go against the principle of drastically reducing CO2 emissions. So the idea is to decline this principle in anything that the EU funds. And regarding the way innovation is going to be funded, once again, it's very early. It's too early to say. To be honest, before talking to you, I was listening to Paolo Gentiloni and Thierry Breton. They were having a press conference, the commissioners, and they did talk about innovation, financing innovation, and they are talking about creating a 31 billion euros guarantee, which is supposed to be used to raise around 150 billions on the market and use it to boost key strategic industries, from pharmaceuticals to, artificial intelligence, you name it. There's a big list, but we understand that these are the core priorities, but we don't know yet how it's going to work exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. I mean, there are a lot of plans with billions of euros, but let's take a little bit of a critical look at that. Europe is well known for these mega plans. The Juncker plan was 315 billion, if I'm not mistaken. It was increased to almost 500 billion. Some people say it had a lot of impact. The Commission claims it created 1 million jobs. Some people said it did not actually raise the bar. Innovation levels stayed the same, for example. So very far from the objective to have Europe as the #1 power in this technology age. Tell us about the priorities. Are we going to have a long list that is here to please the 27? Do you feel that there's a will to change the methodology to be probably more demanding? I mean, we always talk about the entry of the money. Are there some metrics for success? Are there some milestones? Is there some timing difference compared to what you saw in the past?
I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you a little bit, because right now it's a bit early to say that things are going to be totally different. We have not, during the press conferences, not only the previous one, but there have been several press conferences during the last 3 days, and every time the journalists tried to ask very specific questions about how it's going to work, we were a bit disappointed. And there could be several reasons for that, but one of them is that it's just a project, but it's far from being implemented, and so we don't know exactly yet how it's going to work. The only thing that I think is quite positive and is interesting is the fact that the Commission now is allowing itself to think as a strategic planner, but is refraining, of course, from putting the money, investing in a company. So there's a mix between political vision. We define X and Y and Z industries as being strategic, and just like the Juncker plan did, using money from the market. So you use your money as a guarantee, and then through the EIB, but not only the EIB, through several banks, you mobilize investment funds, and you tell them, you pick up the companies you want to invest in, but we incentivize some sectors. And you mentioned the fact that we've been, both of us, in China. I think it's interesting because it reminds me of some political vision that was in China, and that was done in a very different way, because the money was poured in a company, whereas in Europe it's like, we help a certain strategic industry develop, but please don't ask me too much about how it's going to work more precisely, because once again, we still don't know exactly.
Do you have the feeling that, this crisis showed us two things? One, the importance of planning ahead, you mentioned that, and COVID-19 was not a black swan. It was well taught. Everybody saw the Bill Gates TED Talk in 2015. I think even George W. Bush, who is not necessarily come into history for his planning capabilities, talked about that in 2008, about the global pandemic. So, and we were all caught off guard because there was not this planning. On the other side, that was some of the critics on the EU, is that there was a slow start. in this age where you need to be agile, and a lot of member states were a bit under fire for that too. Do you have the impression, on the personal management style, leadership style, that Ursula von der Leyen, Thierry Breton, and maybe the college in general is decided to do things in a different pace than it used to be done before? I mean, remember the Juncker plan. The Juncker plan was initially for the 2008 financial crisis, and it was implemented 2015, 7 years later. You feel that the sense of urgency is kicking in?
Yeah. Yes, I think so. I'm a Brussels guy, so maybe I tend to, want to protect Brussels.
You have been contaminated.
I don't know. But my perception is that things are moving much faster now than they used to move, I don't know, 5 or 10 years ago. What are the reasons for that? It's difficult to tell, but first of all, it's probably how big the crisis is. I mean, the GDP, I think it took a few weeks for the EU to adapt to this new reality. If you're totally honest, you have to say that during the beginning of the crisis, of the COVID crisis, they did not realize, they didn't understand what was happening here in Brussels, but honestly, in Berlin or in Paris or wherever, the same happened. So, and you had to be a former Chinese, someone who had lived in China to be like, whoa, this virus is serious, because you know that China is the place next door. But I think it took a long time for people to realize in Europe, and especially von der Leyen. And so we had some strange moments at the beginning of the crisis when von der Leyen was talking about what she had been doing during her first 100 days in office. And we were like, is it really the topic she should be talking about? So it took a bit of time at the beginning, but then the reaction has been big. And I think we need to say it. We need to be honest about that. What they have done about the Stability and Growth Pact, what they have done about allowing huge government funding to save companies, which was supposed to be totally forbidden. So, I mean, and same for the Stability and Growth Pact. Suddenly it's been allowed to spend. So, you just had the macroeconomics to come and say, this is going to be big. This is going to be the biggest we've experienced in our lifetime in terms of GDP collapse. And then I think the reaction has been big. And we will be allowed to be 100% satisfied if this recovery plan is finalized, which is still a big question mark.
You didn't completely answer my question. Do you feel that for the next crisis, the work of functioning of the Commission, of course, but also the complex interaction with the member states, which obviously are much stronger than they used to be maybe 20 years ago compared to the EU. You feel that this what is going to change to avoid this slow start for the next pandemic or for the next global crisis, and it will happen in this exponential age?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a tough one. What I think is interesting is that the mindsets are changing, and I think not a single country in the EU now is claiming that it could do well on its own. No one is on an island. And I don't know what the game changers have been. I think Brexit has played a big role in this realization. Like, suddenly people have realized that the most important was to stick together and save the single market. And then there is, a global challenging environment. China's assertiveness, the US dramatically changing with Trump presidency. So quite a lot of factors are, pushing Europeans in this direction of, we need to act together. If we do not, we will be out of the map. So I think it's a big change. But to answer your question, you also have to keep in mind that everything depends on national politics. And right now there is a willingness to move together. But what would happen if tomorrow the government changes in the Netherlands or in Italy? I mean, in the Netherlands, you could have an even stronger, position, like we don't want to help the South, and you could have something even tougher in the South, saying we are fed up with these Germans. So I really don't know what will happen during the next crisis, but I think the conditions are here for a better and a faster reaction than before.
Great. Okay, Gabriel, we are already 14 minutes together, so let us go directly to the conclusion questions. The first one is building on what you just said. What could be the hurdles? I mean, we have a Europe that before the crisis was very divided between North and South, East and West. We saw at the beginning that there was very national reactions. There is apparently the plan to reopen borders on 15th of June, but this is not a consensus yet. Will it be individually done? Will it be? What can go wrong between the speech of Ursula von der Leyen 2 days ago at the Parliament and the adoption of this recovery plan? I mean, tell us a bit, what is the roadmap? What are the hurdles, and where we could see surprises?
I think what would be surprising would be if there was no surprise. And being an EU watcher,
you are a perfect Jedi in that. You're ready for the unexpected.
I think I keep explaining to my readers that things will be slow and things will be complicated. And please refrain from concluding that the EU is collapsing, because it doesn't work immediately. It will be tough. It will be tough because some countries, the so-called frugal four, and especially the Netherlands, are extremely, demanding and adamant that they don't want to give money to the South
So the big question between grants and debt, right?
Exactly. The one of the key ideas in von der Leyen's plan is that there's going to be grants. So money that is borrowed is going to be given, and then we have to find a way how to pay back this money.
That's the 500 billion out of 750. It's
exactly. And the Netherlands do not want this, and they are going to fight against this. And if you remember, in February, there was a big negotiation on the MFF, so the 7-year budget. And it was really tough also with the Netherlands, because they didn't want to pay more. And they have the feeling that they are paying for lazy Southerners, which in my opinion is totally crazy. But however, this is the political reality, and Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister, has a very tiny majority, and he has very limited space to move in this direction. So what's going to happen there? No one knows. Will we find a compromise on the 7-year budget with the East, which demands more cohesion? Which, I mean, it's always a mess.
When could this happen? When could this happen approximately? When could this happen from a timing perspective?
The next big moment is June 19, when there is a European summit. So heads of states and governments are supposed to meet, really, not have a video conference this time, but meet for real, if things go well on the health side. So we will see, but we hope that something will move on June 19, and people are hoping that a deal can be reached before the August summer break.
Okay, so that will be 7 months into the crisis.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I really don't know, but I think it's always safer to be a bit cautious about timings. So if people say summer break, it could be October. You don't know.
Well, Gabriel, thank you for everything. You have not been cautious. You have been direct and straightforward, and we like that. So we would like to thank you, and on behalf of everybody who is listening live, or the 3,700 Jedis who will receive that video, I want to thank you very much for your insights. Thank you, and keep
Thank you very much.
post in Brussels. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.